Started with our next session. We know our speakers are very anxious to speak with you. Well, everyone, thank you again so much for joining us for this afternoon. Today's sessions are very much built around GSA's public building service. So it is indeed appropriate that we hear from the individual who manages the nationwide asset management, design, construction, leasing, building management, and disposal of approximately 371 million square feet of government-owned and leased space across the United States and 6 territories, again, which are all tuned in today. I know they are. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you would, please welcome the Commissioner of the Public Building Service for the United States General Services Administration, Mr. Dan Mathews.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that warm welcome, and thank you for coming here today, and everybody out there in the regions that are watching this. Thank you for taking the time to do this. And first, I really want to thank the organizers who put this together. I actually had nothing to do with this. I just learned about it not that long ago, and I have to say, if I knew this was happening, I probably would have put it together exactly the way you did. This first panel was fabulous. It really just dovetails with some of the things I've been talking about ever since I got here, and frankly for a few years before I did get here. So kudos to everyone who put this together. It's a great panel, and I'm sure that the next panel is going to be even better. So one thing that I've got, a few minutes to talk here, and what I really wanted to do was, one, acknowledge the tremendous insights that they had into saving money, what a good deal looks like, and how that's useful to the taxpayer. Because I know for everyone in GSA, they've heard me talk about the goal saving money, meeting the mission requirements of our agencies, but at the least cost that we can for the taxpayer. And I've talked about, that's the goal. We got 3 good ways to do it, through leasing, through our own inventory on disposals and design and construction, and then also through an effort to reform some of the scoring rules and the capital lease requirements and things like that. I always talk about how leasing is oftentimes the low-hanging fruit. It's the place where we have a really significant opportunity to save some money quickly, relatively speaking, up front, and we've got access to other people's capital to make those changes happen. And what my takeaway from listening to this first panel, I really heard term length, delays and change orders, utilities and taxes as really key takeaways as to how we can get better deals for the taxpayer and save money. Like I said, this goes very well with a lot of things I've been talking about since I got here. Again, my goal is to save money and meet these agencies' requirements with as low of a cost as possible. And for, really you think about it in leasing, the last several years, there's been a huge focus on reducing the footprint, which has been tremendously successful. But I like to say, reducing the footprint, that's not a goal. It's a means to the goal. The end is saving money. Reducing the footprint quite often is the best way to get there, but it's not always the best way to get there. And we need to use our judgment to know when that's actually not going to result in the best deal because the goal is saving the money. So what I wanted to do quickly is just run through a pretty short slide deck that I've got. And the reason why I want to show it to you is, we didn't make this for this audience, because like I said, I just learned about this. This is actually something that we've been using when we go out to the regions, but also when we sit down with some of our customer agencies to show them the opportunities that exist in the leasing world and what we can do, what we're trying to do to seize that opportunity and save some money. So the very beginning of this, again, we got 100 million square feet expiring over 5 years. That is an opportunity that just doesn't exist in the owned inventory. That represents at least $55 billion in contract value over the next 20 years. And because we typically stay that long, the decisions we make over the next few years is going to determine that type of spend. Well, we expect those savings at expiration. And this is another really important part. 76% of that value is concentrated in 20% of those leases. So we have a very targeted opportunity as well to save money. And again, historically, reducing the footprint has been probably the primary way to achieve those savings. But the other thing, which really came out in this panel, is longer firm terms. That's a huge key to saving money. So we've been developing a lease cost savings plan. I know some of you have heard this, some of you probably haven't. If you're out in if you're not in region 5 or 4, you'll hear it soon. But we've developed sort of a 4-step process to get at this. One is identify and define the savings. So we know what's expiring over the next 5, 6 years. Every lease has got an expiration date on it. We can start making informed judgments about what the opportunity is with each of those leases for saving in terms of square footage, cost basis, long terms, things like that. We need to sell this plan to the agencies, to OMB, Congress, stakeholders like that. And the reason why that's important is so when we're actually working in the regions trying to execute a transaction with an agency sitting on the other side of the table, they'll be equally motivated to achieve the same savings that we're trying to achieve. So then when we show up to the private sector, we're speaking with one voice. We know what we want. They know what they need to deliver. They've got certitude, and they can deliver it for the best price. 3, we've got some workload issues. We need to be able to get our work done, and we have some workload issues. Let me leave it at that for now. And we need to put people where the work is when it comes to these expiring leases. And then we need visibility into it, step 4. Right now, I'm not sure that really exists. But we're getting really close to achieving it, where we'll have visibility all up and down the chain. Our agencies can have the same visibility into these leases expiring over the next 5 years, particularly the 20% that represent 3/4 of the money. So we can we'll know when they're getting off course, and we can course correct. If you need an escalation because an agency is not giving you a POR or whatever it might be on time, we'll be able to intervene so you can get your work done. This is really for the agencies when we're sitting down to show them. This is just data, very rough, can't take it to the bank, but it came out of the Federal Real Property Profile. These numbers up here, it's sort of an all-in utilization rate for different agencies. On the far right, you see numbers like GSA, 136, that's this building right here. Private sector, 155 on average for office. The whole point of this slide is to show there's room for improvement. Almost every agency can do better, and some can do a lot better. Again, on reducing the footprint, what are some of the common problems they run into? Timely office space requirements, I know you run into that. Upfront capital, and this long-term lease issue, that's a way to solve that problem. And address human capital concerns, i.e. labor unions, negotiations that can take a long time to decide what we're actually able to achieve in a particular agency, and that can slow and delay a procurement, which then costs a lot of money. I think I heard the former administrator, Dan Tangerlini, use this in one of our congressional hearings. And so when I got here, I wanted to confirm, what is that data? How long do we stay typically in a lease, and what's our average firm term? So right now, we stay, on average, 21.6 years, and this is actually a little bit old. When we got the most recent data, that 6.9 figure dropped below 6. So just think about that. Think about everything you just heard in this panel earlier today, the cost that we bear with a short-term lease. It's a tremendous cost, and we're paying that cost, yet we almost never exercise that flexibility that we're paying for. We're paying a tremendous amount for that flexibility that we don't exercise. So just keep that in mind. This is what it looks like dollar-wise. These are actual GSA leases. And crunch the numbers, national weighted averages. The bottom line, those are leases of 3 years or longer, and the top line is 3 years or shorter, and you'll see that it's spread. $25 basically on the bottom, $35 on the top. That's a huge spread. That's our actual data. We are paying a premium for short-term leases. And there's no question about it. That was national data. This is NCR data. And I know it can be a little hard to see, but basically what this tells us, the far left-hand column, that's short-term extension, 3 years or less. The middle column is between 3 and 10 years. The right column is 10 years or longer. Face rents, 25% lower for 10 years or more. And then look at the concessions that we get. Tremendous concessions with 10 years firm or longer. Less than 10-year firms, not so much. Again, everything that they were talking about today, this is what it translates into money that we pay, the taxpayer pays, the agency pays. That's less money they have for mission. And just here's a quick example I wanted to give you to highlight where we're making some really, really good deals. This is one of them. USDA, Food and Drug, it was in Northern Virginia not that long ago. To make a long story short, they were in, I think, a pretty cruddy building somewhere in Northern Virginia, maybe Class B. They're now in Class A space. All their move costs were covered. They reduced their footprint. Their rent shrunk by 20-some percent. 26%. They're in a great space now. Everyone's saving money, and they didn't need a lot of upfront cash because that was worked into the deal. And so I closed this slide deck when I'm meeting with the agencies about the partnership that we need to achieve these types of savings, not just anecdotally, not just with some couple big deals here and there, but to do it across the board. At least for that 20% of the leases that represents 3/4 of our money, we need to be getting those leases done on time. And what we know, and I don't have the data up here, but we know we're not replacing all of our leases on time. We're not coming anywhere close to replacing all our leases on time. So there's a lot of opportunity to do better. We need to focus where the money is, and we need to focus on long-term deals. That's the key that unlocks the savings in most cases. And so when we talk to the different agencies, we need their support for reducing the footprint where it makes sense, where it's a good strategy for saving money. Supporting long-term leases. Now, the tenant always doesn't have to sign up for the long-term deal unless it's a build-to-suit, but we can carry some of that risk too, because again, we're paying a premium for short-term flexibility we almost never exercise. We can carry some more risk on vacancy because we'll be getting better pricing. On-time lease replacements. That's something that we've got to get better at. That costs the industry, and that just passes right on to us in lease payments. So we've got to get better at that, and we've got some strategies to do that. And the tenant agencies have a huge role to play there. They need to get us information in a timely way. You all know how that works, and so this is why we're working at the departmental level, at the regional level, with the other tenants to get them bought into this process, so when you're out there in the field trying to make a deal, you've got a cooperative person on the other side. Avoid short-term extensions, focus on the all-in utilization rate when it comes to the square footage. Again, timely programmer requirements, move and replication money, we need that, or we need to build it into the deal, and no change orders. Time delays, I think we heard Joe talk about that. If we want to tank a deal and waste a whole bunch of money, let's just start putting change orders into it and delay the project. It just doesn't work for the industry. It has real costs. All that gets passed on to us. So this is the type of message that we're delivering here at the national level, at the regional level, not just within GSA, but with our tenants as well. So that, again, the whole idea here is to develop that consensus on the goal for saving the money. And that's just on the, so that was the end of that slide deck. I just wanted to show you really quickly. But that's just on the leasing side. We also have some real significant opportunities on the own side. And I know this second panel, they've got a lot of really good information and ideas to bring as to how we can save money. And again, on time, on budget, those two things go hand in hand. I'm sure we're going to get that message quite a bit. And so, I really want to thank everyone who put this together, for all of you for participating. I know I learned a lot today, and I hope you did as well. And thank you for coming.
So, With that, let's move on to our next discussion, pondering the proposal process. This session is going to highlight the importance of early communication and the type of information that industry seeks to qualify an opportunity and the value associated with certain types of engagements. Now, we'll get a better understanding of the acquisition timeline from industry's perspective and the factors that can end up significantly limiting competition. If you would, please welcome to lead our discussion, Edward DeLisle, co-chair of the Federal Contracting Group, Cohen, Seglias, Pallas, Greenhall, Furman, PC.
Good afternoon, everyone. What we've assembled for you today is a very diverse panel of contractors. On our panel, we have a large general contractor, a small business engineering firm, an 8A project management firm, and a medium-sized subcontracting firm. Everyone here has worked with the GSA and brings with them a different perspective about the GSA's procurement process. And it's our hope and our intent to provide the agency with a unique insight into how industry approaches GSA's contracting opportunities. So with that, I'd like the panelists to introduce themselves, and why don't we start from my immediate left to my right.
Good afternoon. My name is Danita Conway. I am the President, CEO, and Chief Executive Officer for Proven Management LLC. Proven Management LLC is a small business. We are uniquely qualified to sit here in front of you because we have done construction management projects throughout the continental USA. We are located here in Washington, D.C., and have done some major projects such as the Pentagon Renovation Office. Thank you for having us.
Claire?
Hi, I'm Clare Archer. I'm a vice president with Gilbane Building Company. I've been in the AEC arena for 27 years and the last 21 with Gilbane. Most of you probably know us. We're a large general contractor. We work in most of the GSA regions across the country doing CMC work, design build, and lump sum contracting. I personally have been engaged with GSA probably for the last 15 years through Associated General Contractors. I've been an industry liaison with GSA as they've developed some of the CMC approach and language that they've been using nationwide. And for the last 3 years, I've been the chair of AGC of America's National GSA Committee, and I've worked with the central office team as an industry liaison for some of the issues we're going to talk about today. So thanks so much for having me here.
Great. Jim?
I'm Jim Hoffman. I'm the president of Summer Consultants, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with GSA today. My firm is a member of the American Council of Engineering Companies, and we are currently working, or my firm is currently working for the Regions 3 and 11 as a prime design and sub-consultant. My firm's a small business. We're a mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection engineering firm. Over half our work is as prime consultant, and 90% of our work is for the federal government or the Department of Defense. Most of our work is executed under the indefinite quantity, indefinite delivery contracts. And for GSA, we typically design projects from $300,000 to $3 million.
Dave?
Hi, I'm Dave Singleton with Singleton Electric Company. My grandfather started our company in 1954. We started doing work for GSA in the early 60s. My dad's currently the CEO of the company, and I'm the vice president of pre-construction. We've done a number of GSA, big GSA jobs as subcontractors. We did the Eisenhower Executive Office Building. We're at the Department of Commerce right now with Gilbane, and we're doing a few fire alarm replacement jobs with Jim's company at Perkins, Powell, and the Martin Building. So we've got a good amount of experience with GSA, and I'm really grateful have the opportunity to talk to you guys.
Okay, great. Before we get moving, if folks in the audience happen to have questions as we progress through our discussion this afternoon, if you raise your hand, I'd be happy, if time allows and depending upon how things go, to take the questions as we go. If we get behind schedule, I may ask for you to hold your questions until the end, but the idea is to attempt to take the questions as we go. And the same holds true for those out there in cyberspace. I do have an iPad here in front of me, and we'll be attempting to respond to the questions that I may get from elsewhere around the country. So let's get started. And this first question will be for everyone on the panel. Considering each of your individual experiences, what factors do you take into consideration when deciding whether to pursue or not pursue a GSA contracting opportunity? And why don't we start, Dave, why don't we start with you and work our way back down?
Sure. For us, it has everything to do with who's bidding the work as a subcontractor. If we know and have relationships with the general contractors who are bidding the work, we're a lot more inclined to pursue that opportunity. If we have experience with the building or the personnel, we are much more likely to go back somewhere that we've had good experience before. And then it has everything to do with how much other work we're bidding at the time. Right now, and for the last year and a half, we've been just slammed in estimating, and we've really had to pick and choose which opportunities we thought we had a good chance of winning, because there's more opportunities and we've got time and resources to bid. So it really comes into consideration of all those factors when we decide whether or not to bid a job.
Okay, Jim?
Okay. So I'm speaking from the architect engineering perspective. And so first of all, architects and engineers, we're required to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. So unlike construction that's competed on price, AE services are competed on qualifications, and that's under the Brooks Act in accordance with Part 36.6. And as part of that process, individuals or firms submit, there's a short list, there's interviews, you rank the top 3 firms, and then you negotiate with the top ranked firm, provided that you can have a fair and reasonable price. Focusing on a recent GSA AE opportunity, it was for engineering services for one of the regions. It did require a complete architect and engineer team, and it was provided within a standard form 330. Page limits are typical. There's 6 criteria that are generally typical from agency to agency. Criterion 1 is specialized experience. We have the opportunity to provide up to 10 projects that best showcase or profile our qualifications for that particular opportunity. We'll demonstrate past performance either through CPARs if they're available, or past performance questionnaires if they're not. We have an opportunity to provide resumes for our key personnel, and then other factors include capacity to respond to handle multiple task orders, quality control, and geographic location. So going back to this previous opportunity, some key factors of differentiators that we took a look at to see how we might be successful. First of all, we look at specialized experience. How do our projects, how can we demonstrate that we're the right team for this opportunity? And does our team, these projects, do we show well in item G, so we show all the team members participating? The next component is historic. So for GSA facilities, a lot of your facilities are historic, so we need to identify work in historic structures and being sensitive or sympathetic to those buildings. There's also occupied facilities. So, we have to go ahead and demonstrate that we've worked in these facilities, we've designed them where they have a sensitive clients. So you all know very much that courthouses, the judges, their staffs, they can be a little interesting, and that requires us to be very careful. And lastly, one of the key differentiators was the solicitation was looking for past performance as prime, so there's greater weight given. And actually, this makes sense because if a consultant has previously led opportunities, then they're a lower risk to you for delivering the next opportunity. So those were some key differentiators that we were looking for, saying, hey, that's a good fit for us to showcase our qualifications and for your consideration.
So Jim, one of the things you said, I think, was that judges are particular. That's true. Go ahead, Claire.
Thanks. From a general contractor's perspective, and I think I can speak for most of my GC peers, Our look at your jobs and our pursuit of your jobs typically starts a few years before we ever see them come out in Fed Biz Ops. I think it might be a misconception that general contractors wait to look at a bid set to decide whether or not they're going to pursue a job, but I can say from my industry peers that's usually not the case. So there are a couple things that we look at when we're trying to make a go-no-go decision. The first is basically how we get smart on your job or getting smart on your job. You know, we use some of the tools that you'd imagine. We look at your prospectus, you know, if we can get access to it. We look at the AE solicitations, but we are also typically, most of us, big fans of industry outreach to the extent that you can do it. Any industry days or events where we can kind of get our heads around the job in advance, especially in this busy marketplace, is incredibly valuable, and it factors into how we look at your job and how interested we are in your job. We'll look at the GSA team assigned to the job, honestly. Have we worked with you before? Do we know you? Do you know us? Do we think that the GSA team is well aligned with the kind of project that is out in the street, and honestly, will you be a fair and good owner to us? Most of the time, yes, obviously. We'll look at our team too. We understand GSA puts a lot of weight on the key personnel that we bring to the table. So we think a lot about that, and in a busy marketplace right now, we don't have a lot of people on the bench. I think I can say that for probably all the general contractors that you work with, Dave. But we really look to see who's available. Are they aligned with what you're looking for in your team? And also, how prescriptive are you going to be in your requirements for our key personnel? Because a little flexibility in that arena goes a long way right now in our ability to pursue your jobs and be interested in your jobs. And lastly, we look at best value. Is the job a best value job? Is it maybe more of an LPTA dressed up as a best value job? You know, are there geographies where things are driven more by price than technical components? That won't say that we won't chase those jobs, and my peers won't chase those jobs, but it kind of frames how we'll look at them and kind of how we decide to pursue them. Essentially right now, you know, the pendulum swings back and forth in our marketplace, and right now it's really busy. I think, what did Commissioner Mathews say? It's you have workload issues. I think we all have workload issues right now. So we're just trying to gather enough information to make a really informed decision about whether to chase work. Nobody needs exercise in the marketplace right now. And we want to bring forward the best teams and be as competitive for GSA as we can. So that's kind of how we frame our decisions.
Thanks, Clare. Dina?
So I'm going to agree with each of my peers here on the panel to say there is a very distinct way that we approach whether we're going to bid or not bid on a contract. Proven Management is a small business 8A. We established our company based upon my reputation, so I hold that very true and dear. So before we make a bid opportunity, there's a few factors. One is timeliness. When did you put out the RFP? How soon do you want a response back? And how complete is your scope? If we happen to get a RFP to come to us and it's not a complete scope, a lot of the times we will significantly pass on that opportunity just because of that. Other factors for the reason why we may not bid, and I'm going to approach the may not bid first, is about resources. So as a construction management, project management team, we are typically in your space 3 years to 18 months before your actual activity. So if we align our staff with your team for 3 years, we need to make sure that this is a project that we can endure long term. So the timeliness, the resources that you're asking for us always makes the first and foremost decision. The next one is what Clare said about best value. Proven Management is a best value company. We look at your schedule, we look at your risk mitigation, you get me on your job sites all the time, so we want to make sure the opportunities that we're going after are best value. If they're LPTA, we typically don't win those because we're going to come up front with you and give you suggestions in our proposal and give you innovative ways of doing the things that you do every single day. So when we decide to go for opportunities, it's typically because it aligns completely with our organization and yours. Does it make a difference where you're located? Absolutely. GSA just put out a bid in Orlando, Florida. We went after that bid. We won that bid. We can support that bid. GSA put out a bid for the same agency in Texas. We are no bidding that. It is because of the timing of the RFP. They didn't do the forecast for the second one that they wanted to do in Texas, so it wasn't on our radar. We also declined that one because it was a LPTA. We also declined that one because we know from our competitors that there are people that can actually do the job better than we can, and they're local. So there are a lot of factors that we do. We have a scorecard that if you're not 80% of what we believe that we can win, meaning past performance, timeliness, and best value, we typically will not bid on the job.
Just to follow up on something, Danita, that you said, and the other folks on the panel can comment on this. You made mention a few moments ago of the scorecard. Do all the folks on the panel, when you're intending to pursue a GSA opportunity or any federal opportunity, put together a scorecard of some kind? Claire?
We usually, if the opportunity is large enough, we'll do a pretty formal go, no-go. And we do a risk assessment that gives us a cumulative score that'll say basically, you know, red, green, or yellow about pursuit. And the factors that go into that are a lot of the things that I talked about before. Is it a team that we know? Do we have the resources to adequately accomplish the job? Are there, if it's, you know, on a building project, are there unforeseen issues that might be a risk? Are there procurement issues that might impact us along the way? So we do that.
Okay. Just curious, I mean, for the folks out in the audience, this concept of a scorecard, lots of contractors do use these scorecards to make a determination of whether they do go or not. You heard the term go, no go, whether they proceed or not. And it's something that when I talk to folks in government, they don't quite grasp or understand, but it's a very detailed process. And so as you listen to the folks here today, just think about the resources that the folks on the panel have to use in order to respond to one of your opportunities. These scorecards can be a very important basis to determine whether or not they in fact bid on your opportunities or they don't. Claire, this next question is for you. When it comes to major construction projects, what are the most important risk factors that must be taken into consideration?
I would say right now, in the current climate, when we're considering pursuing a large-scale construction project, our biggest risk is really at the trade contractor level. It's our ability to get the best and right trades at the table to do your work. We kind of look at it from both sides in a best value procurement. On the technical side, the subs are often our partners or our lead in bringing like the big idea to the table, the idea that's going to give you a better solution than our peers will be giving you, or a more cost-effective solution, or can get you into your space sooner. And then on the flip side, it's coverage. You know, are we going to get enough subs to give us really good coverage to give you a really competitive number? So right now the trades are really busy, as Dave mentioned, and I work with peers across the country, so it's not just in the DC market where I am. It's pretty much busy across almost every metropolitan marketplace. So we were just actually, Dave, we were just talking about this yesterday, that we've had some traditional trades here that have been really price sensitive, and we've had some significant issues like masonry, but those don't really drive our big ideas. But recently, getting great electrical coverage on our bids has been really something. You guys are all pretty backed up like right now, like what you were saying, and it's tough to get enough coverage. So at any rate, how that relates to you, we'll be looking at our procurements to look at timing. Is there enough time built in so that we can let Dave and his peers get us good numbers, but not have it drag on so long that we lose their interest, because that's easy to do. Are there things in your procurements that make them have undue question? And one of the questions I get from my peers around the country is relative to the PLA language that's in your procurements. And in some marketplaces, I mean, Dave has union and open shop, so you're pretty comfortable with it. But when you get outside of the geographies, to geographies that are more open shop, a lot of questions come up relative to PLA. and making sure that the subs are informed about that part of the procurement, and how GSA looks at it and scores it is really important. And then I guess the other thing I'm just going to touch on briefly, and I know you're going to talk about it, is one-step versus two-step processes. I mean, most of us are a fan of two-step processes. We don't really like to, in this marketplace, compete against 8, 9, 10 other GCs and put pricing together and exercise Dave and his team in a procurement like that. To the extent that there's a second step that kind of narrows the field to 3 to 5, as always, kind of reduces the overall risk for us.
And just to speak, well, I guess my mic's on now. To speak real quick to a point that Claire made, is that with these procurements that go out for a long time, where we put in a price and then there's, in some of these jobs where there's a number of budgets that lead up to a price, and then after we price it, there's a best and final, and then there's another best and final, and then there's another best and final. It really makes us spend a lot of resources that we can't spend on other opportunities, and it's hard to forecast when we'll be able to bid the next big job that's coming along. We do the same kind of thing like they were talking about, where we try to see what's coming down the pike, and even then, it isn't always, more often than not, if it's supposed to be spring of if we think it's going to be spring of 2018, more often than not, it ends up, spring of 2019 when the job actually comes out. So it's hard to figure out when the work's coming and whether we can really commit to a job at the expense of not bidding other work.
And that's tough from GSA's perspective, because I know you're hamstrung by continuing resolutions and can't always control sort of the timing of these procurements as they unfold. But to the extent that they can be streamlined is always a benefit, and also reduces our risk and enhances our ability to get good numbers from the marketplace.
All right, so we heard from our large GC and from our subcontracting panelists. Now, how about the same question from a small or a set-aside perspective? Danita, what are the most important risk factors?
I think I'm going to continue to go back to timeliness and scope. So as a construction manager, the big things that we're responsible for is on cost and on budget, right? So one of the big risks that we look at is whether you actually did the construction management contract before you did the construction GC contract. Proven management likes to be a part of that process, because we want to make sure we're helping to look out for the best interests of GSA up front. So that is the big thing. The other thing is literally the timeline for it. So again, if you had something that we look at that should take you 3 months to do, and we're talking about small dollar values, and it actually has it for 18 months, we already know that there's something inside of that that doesn't look quite right. For our perspective, because we've been doing business with GSA and the federal government, me personally, since 2001, we have a tendency to go back and ask all the right questions so that we can minimize the risk and the exposure that proven management has, and frankly, that GSA has. So from a risk perspective, our big thing is when you come out and do a program, project, or construction management contract, we want to make sure that all the questions are being asked by us to you, and you're answering them as to when you're going to procure the GC, whether we'll be a part of that GC, what is your timeline, and have you realistically given us everything that you want us to do so that we can manage that process.
Great. And we have our first cyber question. What is PLA? That's the that's the question. Who would like to answer that one?
That's a project labor agreement. It's a factor that's often in the best value procurements. It's a weighted factor, and it's a pricing that will provide relative to from our subs relative to a project labor agreement that we would strike with them. So essentially, we submit 2 sets of pricing if you'd like to gain the points associated with the PLA. I think that's the shortest answer.
Right. Okay, next question. How does communication from the GSA or other agencies, for that matter, factor into the decision to pursue a contracting opportunity? And as part of the answer, If you could please provide an example of good early communication practices that have helped steer you toward bidding on or submitting an offer for a GSA opportunity. And Jim, this one is for you.
Great. Well, first of all, GSA Region 5 recently is helping National Capital Region acquire a small business AE contract. And so in January 2017, there was a source of sought, industry responded. Originally, it was under 541.310 architectural services, and GSA did open it up on the actual solicitation to be both 541.330 engineers plus architects. And actually, which code you list first is somewhat important. For this solicitation, it specifically identified that both architects and engineers were encouraged to participate. But if you list 541.310, the next code has a smaller size standard. You're potentially excluding a good percentage of the small business subset of engineers if you do that. So I reiterate with that, and then with the pre-proposal conference, I would submit that's a great example of GSA providing early communication. And as one other observation, one thing that I don't necessarily see this agency do that other agencies do, there's less information on the region's program that's being put out, say, on an annual basis than other agencies. And if you can partner with, American Council or American Institute of Architects, American Council of Engineering Companies, ACG, there's umbrella organizations that support all communities. If you can put that out, Clare was talking about, people are looking for information in advance. So that's something that perhaps this agency might want to take a look at to get more interest in your program.
Okay, Dave.
Yeah, I think for us it has everything to do with whether we think the opportunities are coming that are going to be on schedule. We think if we know that there's a job that has to come out that is definitely going to bid and is definitely going to get started, that for us, if that's communicated early, is we're all in and we're gonna pursue it. If it seems like it might or might not come out, and then if there isn't information about whether it's really going to go, we're less likely to do it. So it has everything to do with that information. And for us as a subcontractor, we get so much of our information from, secondhand from the general contractors. I, call around to all the GCs that we do work with, and some that we still haven't had a chance to do work with, but still are trying to get in the door, and ask them what's coming along, and based on the feedback I get from them is where we get that information. So examples of jobs that have had good communication is, when, like they were talking about these industry days, when we know that the work's coming and can target it.
Okay, we have a question from cyberspace again. Let's see here. Danita, I think this one will be directed to you, but let me read it. It says here, you mentioned that you try to plan your workload 2 to 3 years in advance, that you don't just react to each proposal one at a time. If we provided even rough predictions to you, would that be useful?
Absolutely. So there's a procurement life cycle that we're all very familiar with, right? So there's your strategic plan that happens 3 to 5 years out, and then you get down to the forecasting. So as soon as you know, even if you put it out in the industry and it changes, at least we're understanding that it's coming up. So inside of that, you'll do some industry days, perhaps. Perhaps you'll do some RFIs when you get closer to issuing it. But the sooner that you can give industry an inkling that you have this assignment coming up, we can start to prepare for it, and actually track it. And I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think that's from a small, medium, and large size business perspective. Just being able for us to see what the government is being able to plan out, we can do. And some of us, Proven Management to be one of them, happens to have our favorite agencies, and GSA is one of them. So GSA always has a tendency to come above other agencies when it comes to opportunities, because we work with you for so long, we understand what you want. So again, the more you can give us information to plan for, the more likelihood you'll have us to bid on every opportunity you put out.
Okay. All right, next question. What information is often missing from or unclear within a GSA contracting opportunity that causes the proverbial red flag to go up as you decide whether to participate in that bidding or proposal process? Jim, why don't we start with you?
So I think Clare alluded to it. Actually, the biggest red flag that I think industry sees is how people go about doing design build. And so there's one step and there's two step. So AIA, ACEC, AGC, DBIA, every organization from industry recommends the best practice of design builds pursuits. You're going to have a two-step procurement. Step one, you're going to select on qualifications. You're going to select 3 to 5 folks. Step two, then those limited teams are going to expend a vast amount of resources to go ahead and prepare preliminary designs and concepts. So I think you've heard that the industry is fairly busy, and the good firms have choices. And if an agency elects to have either one-step design build or a lot of people in the second step, there's a very good chance you're losing the better firms. And if you take a look at it, even on the regional contracts for the smaller ones, I might suggest that you might want to have many contractors doing different socioeconomic pools. Well, let's set up different socioeconomic pools of 3 to 5 for service disabled, 8 to 8, whatever you're looking for, so you still have that maximum of 5, so that you're engaging industry. And from GSA's perspective, I believe the advantage is you're getting better qualified teams and you're lowering your risk. So industry suggests best practice of two-step. We would encourage everyone to take a look at that. For my firm, we won't participate in design build if it's one step.
Okay. Anybody? Yes, please.
What's your cost savings when you make that decision?
Is this for design build?
What's your cost savings? You're making a decision on resources that you're going to expend for that. What do you see the cost difference? The contractors estimate could be anywhere for $100,000 to continue to move forward with that proposal on a medium-sized design build. So you're making a value decision on not to, if you don't see it as two steps, you're making a value decision not to move forward because you can expend anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 to do that. Is that a fair number?
From the design perspective, I've heard people say as much as 50%. As a systems guy, I think we can spend 1/6 of our design fee to support a design build contractor to do that, to have a good response and be really competitive. And then if you change it from a 1 in 5 chance, which hopefully is 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 because you picked the right team, and you're down to 1 in 10 to 1 in, the numbers just don't make sense.
Yeah, Sean, I would say would be in the $100,000 or more range. And I'll tell you, for some of these larger scale design builds, trying to find a design firm that wants to, they expend traditionally significantly more than that in a design build pursuit. So finding a teammate that wants to do that in a one-step process is a little tougher if they think there are going to be 8 competitors or 10 competitors. So that's the other side of the penny.
And I think another thing that's a red flag that goes up for us when we start looking at an opportunity, if it's kind of to what Commissioner Mathews was speaking about, is unknown factors create risks, and risks cost money. So if I'm looking at a solicitation and I have questions that aren't clear and aren't answered through the solicitation process, if I'm going to put a number to it, I'm going to have to cover what I think the potential risk could be, which generally for us, once we get into bidding a job, we very rarely don't see it through to providing a price to the GC once we start, taking off, estimating, and bidding it. But the unknown factors that go along with the bid process end up, we pass what we think the costs are going to be on to the GC, and the GC passes that on to the agencies that are putting out the solicitation.
Okay, we have a couple of questions that just came through. One, are you aware of GSA's forecasting tool? Has it been used?
Yes, I'm aware of it. We use that all the time, actually, in our office. The new one that just rolled out not too long ago has been very useful for us to make sure that we're keeping track on the opportunities that you're actually posting, and it seems to be a lot more up-to-date than what it was in the past.
Okay.
I think for the other three of us who all do GSA work, we probably need a little education because we're shaking our heads saying we're not aware. So in part, for whoever's asked that question, I'd ask too, is the forecasting tool both looking at above prospectus and below prospectus? So, because you have both of those pools, right? So, you have these major projects, but you also have a lot of projects within each region that need to get done. And I'm not aware if that covers both, but I'd certainly be interested in getting that information.
And I have another one. Let me read it. So it says here, the panel keeps talking about wanting early notice for an IDIQ solicitation. What is considered early notice? And there's also a follow-up question, so let's start with that. How early, I guess, is early?
So I'll just speak. The Army Corps of Engineers is very good about going to annual briefings and briefing their program at different districts, and they'll stick things, generally it could be as much as 18 months out. If it's 6 months out, it's just if there's some way that you can engage industry. So if we're on an annual basis, make sure, up to a year out, you're engaging industry, and I think Clare might suggest that it would be further. Would be a recommendation so we can start tracking it, and because we want to form teams that will be successful and give you the best value.
And I think you said IDIQ, but I would say for the other traditional procurements, 18 months would be terrific. For design build, we do have to align ourselves with a design partner, and traditionally or typically we'll bring a sub or two on as strategic partners, depending on what kind of solution we're trying to provide. So our ability to lock those up early is pretty important. So, 18 months would be ideal.
And if I may add, I think we're all alluding to the need to have this forum partnership. So the direction that the federal government is going to, most of the time, not one company can do one thing. So we have to be able to form a team amongst people. So when we're getting late notification, that eliminates our ability to provide you a best value team. The bonding requirements that you put in later that we yet to talk about, I'm sure we will, we need to know that up front. So if you happen to know that you're going to do an opportunity that we can see that you're going to need $1 million bond or a $5 million bond, we can start preparing for that up front and looking at other opportunities that we may not bid on, because every time we utilize our bond, that goes against it until it's released and the project is complete. The other side of it is a lot of these opportunities are now requiring people with clearances or that can get into the buildings and codes. So the better chance we have at bidding and making sure we're successful is really about upfront communication. Me personally, I would prefer a bare minimum of a year, which means when GSA rolls out their forecast, that they can again put a tickler on it so we can start tracking it, asking for meetings with you all, and try to give you all back industry information that will help you get the maximum number of companies to bid on your opportunity.
And I think from a subcontractor perspective, we don't need quite as much lead time. Now, definitely if there's a team arrangement for design build procurement and there's going to be a technical package and that kind of stuff, it's a little more intensive for us. But I'd say knowing accurately 6 months out what the bid calendar is going to look like is, would be very good for us to be able to respond to all the opportunities that we'd like to.
And I would assume the marketplace, as busy as it is, plays a role in that as well. The more time you have, the better it is for each of you.
Absolutely, and if I may say one more thing, we talked about money before. So if you look at it, for every time we bid on a project, it's about $500 to $1,000 per page that we submit. So if you have a 10-page proposal and it's $1,000 per page to write that, submit it, make sure it's quality control, make sure all your drawings are in there, we're already talking about $10,000. So from a budget perspective, we need to know up front too, so we can allocate those resources to be able to submit to your proposals.
And the follow-up question to the one that came from the audience is this. Does anyone use the GSA acquisition gateway? And this goes back to, I think, what was alluded to previously, I think, the GSA forecasting tool. Yeah.
We don't, but I'm thinking maybe we'll start. I wasn't aware of it, and that's definitely something I'm gonna look into.
Yeah, it's pretty robust. So what I liked about it is that you can really see what's on GSA's mind, if you will. So it's a clear insight, and there's ways to scroll through it and look at it. I'm not the best expert because my team does it, but I can tell you they use it faithfully.
Okay, quick question about the RFP process. I'm wondering if someone can discuss the importance of the timing of responses to questions during the pre-solicitation RFP process and how substantive the expectation is as to what those responses need to be for your purposes in terms of being able to make the determination, okay, am I going to bid this opportunity or am I not going to bid this opportunity?
So I think we all will jump to the mic for this answer. I'll take it first. So from my perspective, I do believe that timeliness is important. A lot of the times, the answers to our questions is your answers to our questions is whether we're going to bid or not. It could be something very simple as what is the first date of the kickoff meeting. But if we're asking you questions, we're telling you that we can't bid without them. So when you have a delay, you delay our process. Even when you have a delay and extend the deadline for us, that doesn't necessarily serve us the best because now we've delayed everything that was coming behind you. So we typically will ask in our questions, can you turn a quick response around? Because it's almost like double dutching. We're all waiting to get in there, get it done, get it in so we can move on to the next thing. So questions and answers from you all, from my perspective, is 100% of whether we will respond to your bid or not. If you do not answer our questions, we will not respond to your bid. And if we do, we will give you 2 pages of assumptions. So
for us, when we were bidding it as a sub, I think I kind of alluded to this before, we don't have an opportunity to tell you what assumptions we take or exclusions or that kind of thing. We do a little bit in our scopes to the general contractors, but really, again, questions that don't have answers assume risk, and risk costs money. So and it's also what I think the big thing I want to get across is we've been doing this for a long time. However, it is not an exact science. We aren't able to completely quantify exactly the risk that we think is going to happen if a question doesn't get answered. It's really a lot of informed people talking, disagreeing, and ultimately coming to a consensus about what the risk is and how much it's going to cost and what we should put in. And it's not exact. We don't count exactly how much wire, how many light fixtures. I mean, on the jobs we count those things, but when there's an unknown factor, we can't quantify exactly how much material, how much labor it's going to be. And it's a lot of, hey, well, this seems a lot like that job we did at the Mary Switzer building. It seems like it's going to go kind of like that. Maybe we should put the same kind of factor in for the temporary lighting, for example, or something like that. And again, if we don't have clear answers to questions early, we end up having to make assumptions and take the bid all the way through so that those costs just get carried on.
I can tell you from my perspective, I've litigated cases where the issue has come down to, in this exact situation, the contractor being told, bid it as you see it, right? Bid it as you see it, whatever that means. Clarity is the key, I think, is what we're hearing. All right. So, and this question goes to each of you, and we'll start with you, Danita. What is the one takeaway that you'd like to leave the audience with today?
We talked about pondering the idea of bidding a project and whether we're going to take it or not. We also talked about the fact that it's a procurement cycle that we're looking for. So my biggest takeaway for you all, if we could get the information as soon as you have it, if we can get a clear scope, meaning that you've given us as many answers as you have, and then turn around the questions and answers as soon as possible, would make your bid rates go up and the likelihood that the contractors will feel comfortable in bidding your requirement.
Claire?
From the large general contractor community, we want to work with GSA. Your portfolio of work is attractive. It's interesting work. I mean, we all have a long track record and history of working with GSA, most of the large contractor community. So you're a place where we want to be. What we'd ask is that you help us bring the best solution forward by many of the things we've talked about. Give us as much project information as you have. It's really hard for us to work in a vacuum. And these are large-scale, important jobs, and you have important tenets that we're trying to satisfy with the solutions that we bring forward. We know that there are procurement integrity challenges, obviously, to how you deliver information, but use our industry organizations if that's a vehicle to provide information to us, like AGC, AIA, DBIA. The industry days we think are really valuable, but anything you can do to kind of bridge the gap between you and us in these processes is hugely important, especially in a really crazy marketplace like we're in today. And also, I would just say, because of the marketplace, some level of flexibility in your requirements, either from a key personnel perspective or an experience perspective, will go a long way right now. Just modest flexibility. I know Region 4 just had a procurement where they sort of not relaxed isn't the right word, but gave some latitude in the requirements for experience for a courthouse program or project to sort of expand it to having experience in the marketplace on a similarly large job. Didn't have to be a courthouse, but I think it went a long way in our marketplace to sort of opening up people's interest in pursuing the job. So I think a little flexibility in this marketplace will go a long way.
From a small business engineering perspective, thinking about the regions and the contracts that you all have to support you, I would ask you, what's the correct NAICS code for the different opportunities that you have out there? You know, is this or we start off, you know, many of your projects below prospectus, they're smaller, they're going to tend to solve a problem. Sometimes those problems are driven on finishes, and they're driven on space plans, and they're naturally architect-led. It strikes me that half the work that you all have, though, are engineering system replacement projects. And so to the extent that's true, making sure that you all have engineers in the suite of contracts. And it's not so much that when you get your full teams, you know, you have an engineer on the team, but, you know, having the expert leading that, and if you will, not having a markup on that where an architect may not, well, they're just not in the driver's seat on the system, so let's just do it that way, but there's some costs associated with that. So if you all would provide opportunities that allow both architect-led teams and engineer-led teams, whether it's a single procurement like Region 5 is doing now, like if it's different procurements like Region 3 did. Anyways, just if you could do that, then you're going to get subject matter experts addressing your hardest problems at the best cost point. And I think that goes a long way to delivering value that the commissioner was speaking to.
Dave?
Yeah, I'd just say, as we talked about, answering questions as soon as you can, as thoroughly as you can, and having a realistic expectation of our ability to be able to respond to those questions. You know, if the entire set of drawings is reissued and we only have a week to respond to it, it's going to cost a lot of money. We're going to have to, you know, we're going to have, you have to have a realistic expectation for what we can respond to and in a timely manner. And, you know, if you know a job is going to get pushed, the sooner you could communicate that to us so that we can plan is better, so that we can then, if there's something in the interim that we can also bid, we'd like to do that too. And I guess finally, just the thing that I said a few times is that the risk that we assume, we have to have put a cost to it. So risk costs money. And we don't, the jobs that are the most successful for us are the ones that are most successful for you, the ones that stay on schedule, that don't have a ton of change orders, that we know that there's an end date and everybody's working towards that end date, really work out the best for everybody. So I know it sounds good on paper, right? And it sounds like you can just magically make it happen, but it involves people. And from the contractor side as well from your side, that we all just have to work together to stay on task and make a successful project.
I guess I'll just add one thing. All of us here on the stage are AGC members and participants, and GSA has been a consistent contributor at its FedCon event for a number of years. And you keep hearing from the panelists about the sharing of information and how important it is. That event is one example of how information is shared and has been shared by GSA and other federal agencies to the benefit of the contractors, which in turn benefits the GSA because it encourages participation by the contracting community, and it builds the sort of partnership that, of course, both sides are looking for. So just wanted to throw that in there. If there are no other questions, thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings our panel presentation to a close, and I just want to thank you so very much for your time and attention and bringing your enthusiasm to these proceedings. To bring a formal close to today's proceedings, if I may please ask you to please welcome the Senior Procurement Executive from the U.S. General Services Administration, Mr. Jeffrey Kosis.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to thank our wonderful panelists for joining us today. We had two really terrific sessions. I'd also like to thank the Ombudsman team for putting this initiative together today under the leadership of Melissa Gary. This is our third Reverse Industry Day, and I think you heard some really key messages today from our Deputy Administrator, echoing her and the Administrator's themes around competition, effective competition at the contract level and at the task order level, and about transparency. You heard even more directly from the PBS Commissioner the importance of saving money. And when we actually kind of talk about what did the panelists talk about today, we heard some really central, some key themes. We heard in the first panel all about certainty, about predictability, about the importance of long-term arrangements, about the working of capital markets. We heard about the tax clause. We had a whole host of insights on how the way that we approach the deal gets into how effectively it's structured, gets into the savings. From the second panel, we heard a tremendous amount of that when we're dealing with a very active, very healthy market, if the first that they hear of our job is when the solicitation comes out, they're not bidding, that we're not going to get effective competition, we're not going to get good pricing. We heard quite a bit about communication, about effective engagement, about having that healthy dialogue. I think we also heard a very interesting factoid that at the small business level, it costs about $8,000 a page to put together a proposal. In our very first panel, we heard a similar message from a large business talking about putting together a proposal is multiple thousands of dollars per page. Great chance to think about page limits, folks. Today, thank you all for participating. We had 631 people registered for the event. I think about 500 around the country actually did dial in and participate, and a very good crowd in the GSA auditorium as well. Thank you all for your participation. Shortly, those of you who did register will receive a survey, a chance to tell us what's worked in these events, what didn't work, what do you like, what do you want to hear more of, where do we want to focus this training. So again, thank you for the time, thank you for the participation. Melissa, Sam, Henry, thank you for the great job putting this together today.
You've got to get those nice candid shots.